These are live pictures out of Washington, D.C., where the President and Vice President are reviewing the troops in the east front of the Capitol. More on this soon, but let's bring in Sky News Washington correspondent Annelise Nielsen now. Annelise, good morning, good afternoon. Where you are, it has been an historic morning.
An historic morning on so many fronts. This is an inauguration that will go down in the history books for being just so unusual. No crowds here on the National Mall, none of the anticipated protesting or rioting that the army was scared about, and that's why they had such an extraordinary showing of National Guard as well, 25,000 on the ground here. And so this is really going to be a defining moment. For so long in the campaign, we heard Joe Biden say that this was an inflection point for America, and this is the best indication that that's exactly the case. This will be where they decide what direction they head in next, and the challenges are going to be severe. What we heard Joe Biden say, which I think will really be the defining thing from his inaugural speech, was that America right now is divided and it's facing what he called an uncivil war.
But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue.
One of the other continuing themes of his inaugural address was also this idea of going back to an America where people are united, where they agree on an agreed set of facts. And that really harks back to what we saw beginning from the inauguration in 2017, that first time we had the Trump administration say that they gathered the biggest crowds in history right here on the National Mall. It simply didn't stack up to the evidence, and that began a very tenuous relationship with both the American people who didn't vote for the Trump administration, but also the media who had to work with the Trump administration on very fractious terms throughout those years. What we saw from President Joe Biden today was him saying that we need to get back to finding what brings Americans back together.
Just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever. Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans. All Americans. And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did.
What we also saw happen today was history being made with Kamala Harris being sworn in as Vice President of the United States, the first woman in that role, the first woman of colour, the first woman with South Asian heritage to be taking up that role. And she didn't get a chance to speak today. She spoke yesterday alongside President Joe Biden, but when she did speak, it was something that right around the country people were watching as one of the many things that make this inauguration unlike any other.
Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
The duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Day of history, whichever way you look at it, Annelise. Meanwhile, the outgoing president, Donald Trump, a day for history when we're talking about him. CNN reporting today, we were talking about this yesterday, about whether he might in fact leave a letter for Joe Biden. CNN reporting that he has, in fact, done that. But what's he been up to this morning?
We've heard that he's left a letter, and also Vice President Mike Pence has left a letter for Kamala Harris, but of course he participated in today's inauguration ceremony. Meanwhile, Donald Trump left Joint Base Andrews. It's there he flew out to Florida. There was a small ceremony that he organised, a military send-off. There wasn't much of a crowd, not like the ones we've seen for President Donald Trump in the past. You can expect he'll be trying to rally the troops more when he's in Florida and potentially into the coming months and years, but for his send-off, it was a rather modest one. What we did see, though, was a pretty traditional speech from Donald Trump.
We have worked hard. We've left it all, as the athletes would say, we've left it all in the field. We don't have to come and say, we'll never say in a month when we're sitting in Florida, we're not going to be looking at each other and saying, you know, if we only worked a little bit harder, you can't work harder.
Annelise, obviously you're there at the moment. Can you give us a sense of what it is like to be there amongst all of this? I just mentioned that, you know, it is a very unique inauguration given the pandemic. There's no crowds. There are very limited people, just the congressmen in front of congressmen and women who are in front of those speeches. But give us a sense of what it's like to be there today. Is all that security, as far as we can tell, not too much trouble out in the streets, but to be there, give us an idea of what that's like.
No trouble at all, and it is just an absolute ghost town. You do just get this sense of what an absolute privilege it is to be here. There's so few people that get to be this close to this inauguration, and really you get a sense of how tight the security was because of their concerns. There have just been guards everywhere, so many layers of security to get to this point where you needed the Secret Service vetting to even get a pass to get in, and we've heard they were even restricting numbers after the initial approval of these passes to get into this spot. So it did feel like we were just witnessing an incredible moment of history, but you also did get the sense that this is a very tenuous time for America. You get the sense of just how fragile things are at the moment and how important it was to see Joe Biden take that oath on the balcony where it's done every other year. There is precedence to do it inside. There were security concerns and discussions about doing that inside, but this was a time when they needed to bring some normality back to the United States, to bring that sense that this is the normal transition of power so that there is some calm going into the years ahead. And that was really reflected in this poem from this poet laureate, the youngest poet laureate, 22, a special role created for a youth poet laureate here in the United States. Amanda Gorman was given the task of writing this poem, and reportedly she actually had quite a bit of trouble trying to encapsulate what America is going through at the moment. But then during the Capitol riot, she penned this poem, and this is what she said.
We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
And Annelise, there's so many other little things that go along. You had Lady Gaga, well, not so little, but she delivered the national anthem. There's pictures of Bill Clinton apparently falling asleep. You've got Bernie Sanders, who didn't quite dress up as well the way people might have thought.
Look, fashion is one of those things that you don't always bring it up, but at an event like this, it's so much a part of the imagery of what's put forward, and there were some pretty deliberate fashion choices made here, especially promoting US designers. If you look at what the First Lady, Jill Biden, wore, she picked an American designer, called Alexandra O'Neill of Markarian. Now, her outfit was made in New York City's Garment Center and had a matching mask made for it. And if we see this kind of continues through to the decisions made by Kamala Harris and Michelle Obama. Kamala Harris picked black designers, Christopher John Rogers from Baton Rouge, who's based in New York, but also Sergio Hudson, who's been a long-time favourite of Michelle Obama. She picked Sergio Hudson for her outfit as well. Now, Bernie Sanders, as you mentioned, he's getting quite a bit of attention because he wore the same jacket he always did, didn't feel like the need to buy anything special for today, but also his mittens are going viral. And it sounds silly, but it is quite cold here, so you can understand why he'd want mittens. But they're also made from a constituent in Vermont, and they're actually made of recyclable material, so it's very on brand. And we do have to pretend to care about what the men are wearing too, so we can confirm Joe Biden and the first gentleman, Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman, I should say, we're both wearing Ralph Lauren.
Annelise Nielsen, with the complete wrap there. Appreciate that, Annelise. We'll be talking to you throughout the morning. Just want to bring up some live pictures. The motorcade is moving from the Capitol building at the moment. The motorcade involving the 46th President, Joe Biden, the now President Joe Biden, as well as Vice President Kamala Harris. Ex-presidents Barack Obama, Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, they're all heading to Arlington Cemetery. That's where the presidents will be participating in a wreath-laying ceremony at the tomb of the unknown soldier. So these live pictures coming from Washington, D.C. and what has been and continues to be a day of history.